Tuesday. It's been a while since I have. School is about to begin, and I know some of you all are so disappointed in that, and I'm sorry, but it had to start at some time. A lot of us probably are not going back until uh, probably after in about 2 weeks. I know I don't go back until August 12th. So it will be a while. So let's go ahead and get started. Make sure my mic is working because sometimes y'all know about technology. Um, it it doesn't work, and I've been on here I know one time, and I was just talking away, and it wasn't working. So, for those of you all who are new to my live streams, welcome to Teaching Tip Tuesday. My name is Michelle Williams, aka the Ignited Teacher, here on social media. I help teachers, math teachers, to effectively manage their classrooms and to increase student achievement. So, I help math teachers in the world. If you're struggling with mathematics, I help with the content as well as that classroom management piece. The classroom management piece is the foundation for all teaching. And I do it from a social emotional learning classroom community perspective, not from a discipline focused or reward and routine focused. And that's what I talk about here on my platform. So tonight we are talking about three keys for managing difficult classrooms. That's what we're actually talking about tonight. And for those of you all who are new to my blog, I'm going to go ahead and let me see. I'm going to share my screen. So we're starting back with the school year, and I have a group managing difficult classrooms, and that group actually is current. I have a person in there who currently asks this question. She said that she was having she was moving to fourth grade, and the group that she's getting is known to be a difficult group. And, I'm going to be honest with you. Every group has its own reputation, and I am not a stranger to that, definitely. And one of the things that, you have to be careful about students and reputations, because kids are different for different teachers, and you'll be surprised how some kids act differently with other teachers. So you have to be careful about reputation. That's first thing. And sometimes those students' reputations hold true. I keep flipping back and forth, making sure my Facebook Live is on. All right, so here's the blog post from my blog. And it says 3 keys for managing difficult classrooms. So the appropriate level of dominance, and I'm going to discuss that tonight, and appropriate levels of cooperation, and then the awareness of those high need students, and basically the foundation, which is your relationships. So if you want to read this blog post, I put the link in the description over the live stream. So the first thing that I'm going to discuss is the appropriate level of dominance. And a lot of teachers feel like, dominance, I'm not trying to control the children. Well, this works The research that I'm basing this on comes from Marzano's The Keys to Classroom Management. And he talks about dominance in a way that teachers should be seen as a person that can take control of the situation, not necessarily trying to control children, not necessarily telling kids how to think. None of those things are what he's describing in appropriate level of dominance. Actually, he's saying that your ability to provide a clear purpose and strong guidance with academics and behavior. So I'm gonna give you an example. I've had some students that actually say, well, she just lets us do anything. She just lets us play. And for some teachers, they get taken aback for that because they are like, no, I'm not letting them play. This is, well, the kid's perception of how the teacher leads, it's purely perception. It's purely perception. And some kids need a stronger leader because they have to know that when the chips are down and it's just you all, the teacher is going to be able to control the classroom. She's going to be able to lead them. And I was having a conversation today with one of the teachers in my classroom management course. We did a video chat and we were talking about how students, certain triggers, certain things, kids have different experiences. So, and how they perceive things. If they come from a household where there's a strong dominant force, they may not know how to deal with a teacher who doesn't come from that. But I tell all teachers, you can manage a classroom. You have it within you to manage a classroom. Now, a lot of times teachers tend to take how they were disciplined and corrected and take it to their classroom. Sometimes that is a clash. It is. And I'm going to be honest with you, even from both ends of the spectrum, it can be a clash. Some people grew up where the parents were too hard and the kids come with their own traumatic experiences. And sometimes you may be adding to the trauma. So those are things that you have to really be cognizant about when you're the leader and you're leading your classroom. Now, one of the things that I promote, especially in my classroom management course, is a classroom community. A lot of times teachers forget that when you are in a classroom, that is your community. And a lot of our students, because I'm really big on social emotional learning, and I shared this with the teacher that I was talking to today. I told her that my students had issues with each other. They were just bickers and they would argue with one another. And like the most simple thing, they thought everything was intentional. So if we're lining up to go to lunch and a student accidentally bumps into them and it goes from this big to this huge blow up. So my suggestion, if you're going to focus on classroom community, definitely get those SEL, social emotional learning, that framework, and look at where your kids' deficits are. A lot of times you have to adjust your classroom management plan. Your classroom management plan is not going to reach all of your students. And I'd say that based on the research, they're saying that in a classroom where, and we're not talking about in schools where, like the school that I was at, the school had been neglected for years. So there was some work that had to be done with the students because they lacked structure. It was a constant turnover, poor kids, lack of success, no technology, just nothing was really happening there. So as you know, if you're working in that area, that research really doesn't pertain to that. I say if you're in that type of environment, your classroom management plan may work for 50% of your children. After that, it's not going to work. It's not. A lot of kids need certain um, supports in place, which goes into tier two behavior interventions. Then, you talk about, okay, what are these kids' triggers? What can we do to help with some replacement behaviors? That's totally different. So if you're a new teacher or a teacher, this is your second or third year, you had a difficult year, remember your classroom management plan is not set in stone. It's not. There has to be some room for adjustment. And I know that there's all this research out there, but the best research is action research, and action research is done right there in your classroom. So you have to take the research that's out there and make a professional decision about what kind of classroom management plan that you're going to have. So back to Marzano's research. And we talked about the appropriate level of dominance. We know we're not talking about coming down on the children. We're talking about a teacher that can lead and set clear expectations for behavior and academics. And then there's the appropriate level of cooperation, and I kind of touched on that. Provide flexible learning goals. Take a personal interest in the kids. Use equitable and positive classroom behaviors. A lot of our students, especially in the schools that I work, they lack positive mindsets about success because a lot of the students, like I'm going to high school next year, they've had no success. I've looked at some of the children's records and it's hit or miss. They may have had some successes, maybe in 8th grade. Now they're in 11th grade and they haven't passed the standardized test. Those children, it's hard to see themselves as successful. So you have to use equitable and positive classroom behaviors. Now, we're talking about equitable. Sometimes equity is not fair, and that's what that classroom community is going to help children understand and have some empathy for other students, because some children get upset because you allow another child to do this. Like for me in my classroom, I teach math. Some of the kids can use calculators in elementary school, obviously because they have an IEP. So, but some of my students couldn't understand that. Well, why does he get to use a calculator? Because everybody doesn't have the same ability, and you tell them that from a compassionate standpoint. So everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. Some kids are better in reading, some kids are better in math. So you have to keep telling them that in our community, so we support them. And like I told one of my students, I said, when you're struggling with math, what do? I put you in a small group. We have ancillary tutorials. I help you. That's what the calculator does for them. So it kind of just, takes some time for them to adjust. But you have to use equitable stuff, behaviors, classroom behaviors for those children. And sometimes it's hard for other children to understand, and that's their trigger, because some of them may have that background at home where things are not fair, but it may seem unfair on the outside, but it's really not. But cultivating a classroom community where you're implementing that social emotional learning framework, where they're learning how to build relationships, and that's peer to peer and adult to student. Also, in Marzano's framework, it's the awareness of high need students. Now, in his work, he identified 5 categories of high need students. And you're probably thinking high needs, the kids that are at risk. That's not what he actually talks about. He says the first one is passive, avoids domination of others. Two is aggressive, overpowers, dominates, harms, or controls others without regard for their well being. And we know those are your bullies. Three, attention problems, motor or attention deficits. We have those children. Perfectionists. Now, these are your GT children, or the children who have parents that want them to be gifted and talented. And they push them. A perfectionist student is a student that you have to definitely be aware of. Because even in my, where I work at, some of the students, they are at the top of where they are. And I have to keep them grounded and tell them, look, it's okay to make a mistake. Because some of my students get to math and they've made A's. And then when they get to me, they was like, well, I never had a B. Well, I'm sorry. Welcome to my classroom. Because you're not going, I mean, if you have great potential in mathematics, it's not going to be easy. Now, if you make an A and you're where you need to be, hey, you get an A. But that A is not going to come easy, not in my classroom. And then the fifth high needs student, he says, is socially inept, misinterprets the nonverbal signs of others. Yeah, and that's on both ends. You have the aggressive people who misinterpret, and then you have the other little quirky kids that are like, oh, I don't know, and then they're all over the children. The children hate them, and everybody has that person in their classroom at some point or another. But even with all of these three keys, the foundation is building relationships. You cannot manage your classroom without knowing those children. And you have to be intentional about building relationships with kids. On my website, there is, and you may have even taken the quiz. I have a class, what's your classroom management style quiz. If you are discipline focused, meaning that you feel like referrals is the cure all for everything and being punitive with children, you are not focused on building relationships. And that's going to be a problem because our children on both ends in suburban and urban America, they come with a whole bunch of baggage that we're not, as adults, a lot of us did not have to deal with. In urban, we have parents, children that are raising themselves, raising their siblings. And then in suburban America, you just have parents that are unavailable. Yeah, they have the means, but they're not there. And the children are doing all kinds of ungodly things. So it's just different ends of the spectrum. So you have to build those relationships with children. And, you know, if that's not your focus, then you're going to have a rough year. You really are. It's going to be rough, and God help you, because at the end of the day, my relationships with my students have basically really definitely saved me from a lot of different things. So that's all I have for Teaching Tip Tuesday. If you have any comments, if you want to join my group, you can go to Facebook. It's a Facebook group, and type in Managing Difficult Classrooms. It's a closed group, but you can still search for it. So I will see you all on social media or next week for Teaching Tip Tuesday. Bye-bye.